Grace sat at the small kitchen table, the early morning light spilling across her laptop. A fresh cup of tea steamed beside her. The house was quiet. Derek had left early, as usual, saying something about a client meeting. Their daughter, Jade, was still asleep upstairs. She clicked through emails half-heartedly until a real estate listing caught her eye. It was for a luxury condo in Lekki Phase 1. She tilted her head, curious. The photos were beautiful: tall glass windows, a marble kitchen island, a view of the water. She smiled faintly. For years, she had saved every spare kobo, every dollar, for a house like this. Their house. Then something made her stop. She scrolled down. Buyer, Derek Adebayo. And beside it, sold. Her name wasn't listed anywhere. Her smile faded slowly. She clicked open another tab and searched the address. It was unfamiliar. Not where they'd planned. Not what they'd talked about. She felt her chest tighten, but her face stayed calm. Almost too calm. She opened her email again. One unread message. Bank notification. Large withdrawal confirmed. Her eyes scanned the numbers. It was all of it. Everything she had saved. Years of careful planning. Years of patience. Gone. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Her hand moved steadily, pulling out a second phone she kept in a drawer. The one she used to track joint account activity. A few taps later, her screen loaded a new video. Security footage from the building. There he was. Derek, smiling. And with him, a young woman. Light-skinned. Pretty. Wearing nothing but a silk robe and confidence. They were laughing. She leaned into him. He poured champagne. Grace watched without blinking. Her finger hovered over the pause button, but didn't press it. She let the video run. Derek kissed the woman's cheek, said something that made her laugh harder. He looked relaxed. Happy. Grace looked down at her untouched tea. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She just stared at the screen, eyes still, face unreadable. Her silence was louder than any shout. Grace had always been the quiet one, the steady one. She was raised in Benin City by her mother, a strong woman who worked 2 jobs and still made time to braid Grace's hair every Sunday night. Her mother always told her, "Don't be the loudest in the room. Be the one people can count on." From a young age, Grace learned how to hold things together. She studied hard, helped with house chores, and never complained. Even when her classmates teased her for wearing the same shoes every term, she kept her head high. After university, she moved to Lagos and started working in human resources. People at work respected her. She was the one who handled workplace problems with calm words and quiet solutions. She was known for her composure, her patience, her ability to remain calm even when others lost control. Then she met Derek. He was tall, smooth-talking, and full of ideas. He said he wanted to build something great. He spoke about real estate, business deals, and traveling the world. He had a way of making people feel like the future was just around the corner. At first, Grace believed him. She thought, finally, someone who wants the same things I want. They got married within a year. She wore her mother's old gold earrings on their wedding day. Derek was all smiles. The early years were hard. There were bills. Rent. Derek changed jobs often. He always had a new plan, a new idea. Grace didn't mind. She believed in him. She cut costs. Saved every little bit she could. No vacations, no luxury bags. Just careful budgeting and sacrifice. When she gave birth to Jade, she promised herself that her daughter would have a better life. A stable home. A strong example. But over time, Derek started to change. He no longer talked to her with the same warmth. His big ideas became risky business ventures she barely understood. Whenever she asked questions, he got annoyed. "This is a man's job, Grace. Just trust me," he would say. He made most of the financial decisions on his own. She let him. She thought it was her duty to support him. But years passed. The savings grew, mostly from her salary. And the dream stayed a dream. He became colder, distant. He sometimes snapped at her in front of Jade. Other times, he just ignored her completely. Still, Grace didn't argue. She kept her routine. School runs. Office. Dinner on time. Smile when needed. But she watched. Jade, now 11, was noticing things. She had become quiet. Her eyes followed her parents carefully, like she was trying to figure out if something was broken. Grace hated that. One weekend, she visited her best friend Naomi, who had known her since university. They sat on Naomi's small balcony, sipping Zobo. Grace spoke quietly. "I think Derek is hiding something. There's a house I didn't know about. Money missing." Naomi nearly dropped her drink. "You think? Grace, are you serious? Have you asked him? You need to talk to him." Grace looked down at her cup. "I will," she said softly. "But not now." Naomi frowned. "You're being too calm about this." "I'm not calm," Grace said. "I'm careful." Naomi sighed. "I know you. You're planning something." Grace didn't respond. She watched the sky darken, the clouds moving slowly, like everything was unfolding in its own time. She wasn't going to shout. She wasn't going to beg. But she was going to find out everything. And when she was ready, she would act. Grace took a day off work without telling anyone why. She wore a simple dress, packed a notebook in her bag, and went straight to the bank where she and Derek shared their joint savings account. She smiled politely at the woman behind the desk, handed over her ID, and said, "I need to understand a recent withdrawal." "A large one." The woman typed on her computer, then paused. Her eyes flicked up. "Ah, yes. That was for a mortgage. The funds were used to pay part of a down payment." Grace kept her voice steady. "Whose name is on the mortgage?" "Just Mr. Derek Adebayo," the woman replied. "Would you like a printout of the transaction details?" Grace nodded. "Yes, please." She walked out of the bank slowly, holding the printed paper in her hand like it was made of fire. Later that night, when Jade had gone to bed, Grace sat at the dining table and searched online for a private investigator. She picked a woman. Someone quiet, professional. No drama. "I just need photos," Grace told her on the phone. "Proof of where my husband is staying. And who he's with." 1 week later, the envelope came. No return name. No markings. Just clean, cold truth inside. Grace opened it in the kitchen, her hands steady. The first photo, Derek holding a wine glass on the balcony of the same condo from the listing. Second photo, Alana, smiling barefoot, wearing a robe. Third, Derek unlocking the door, carrying bags, looking comfortable, like a man at home. They weren't hiding. They weren't afraid. Grace stared at the images, then quietly slid them back into the envelope. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She placed the envelope in a drawer next to old tax documents and Jade's birth certificate. Then she made dinner. That evening, Derek walked through the door looking annoyed. He dropped his briefcase by the couch. "Today was hell," he muttered. "These people at work are mad. I'm carrying everything on my back." Grace looked up from the kitchen. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked over to him. She kissed him gently on the cheek. "You're tired," she said softly. Derek grunted. "You don't know the half of it." He didn't notice the change in her eyes, but they were not the same. Grace was no longer waiting. She was watching, preparing, quiet, like a storm just before it breaks. Grace started waking up an hour earlier than usual. While the house was still quiet, she sat at the dining table with her laptop, a notepad, and a cup of tea. Every morning, she searched through old emails, bank records, and files Derek had once asked her to ignore. What she found made her stomach turn. There were unpaid taxes going back 3 years, letters from the revenue office, unopened and hidden in the bottom drawer of his study desk. She found strange transactions to names she didn't recognize. A few of them led to an account that had her name on it, except she had never opened that account. Her heart pounded as she stared at a digital form. The signature looked like hers, but it wasn't. Derek had forged it. She printed everything. She started keeping records, emails, screenshots, even photos of letters. She used a folder and labeled it simply, backup. Later that week, she made an appointment with a lawyer named Tamika. She was highly recommended, calm, smart, and sharp as a blade. Tamika looked over the files with quiet focus, then closed the folder slowly. "Do you want to press charges now?" she asked. "Not yet," Grace said. "I want to be ready, fully." Tamika nodded. "Then keep building. Don't let him know you know." So Grace returned home and wore her mask. She made Derek's favorite stew on Sunday. She laughed at his dry jokes. She rubbed his shoulders when he said he was tired of carrying everything. He started to relax around her again, thinking things were back to normal. At night, he'd scroll through his phone, messaging Alana in the bathroom. He thought Grace had gone back to being blind. She hadn't. She was just playing her part. One afternoon, Naomi came over with puff and frustration in her eyes. "Why haven't you kicked him out?" she asked, arms crossed. "You've got proof, Grace. He's stolen from you, lied, cheated, forged your name, and you're still making him stew." Grace looked at her friend and smiled gently. "I'm not soft, Naomi. I'm patient." Naomi threw her hands in the air. "You're too calm for this world, I swear." Grace didn't answer. She just cleared the plates. That night, Jade came into her mother's room while Grace was folding laundry. "Mom," she said quietly, "are you and Dad fighting?" Grace knelt down beside her, brushed a curl away from her daughter's face. "We're not fighting," she said softly. "Mommy's just making some things right." Jade nodded, not fully understanding but comforted by her mother's voice. During the day, Grace stayed focused. At work, she updated her resume and contacted an old colleague who had moved to a bigger company. She started meeting with a housing agent on her lunch breaks, looking at small but clean apartments, places where she and Jade could live peacefully. She didn't want luxury anymore, just safety, something hers. She opened a new personal bank account, this time in her name only. Slowly, she moved her salary into it. She also transferred small amounts from an old investment account Derek had forgotten about, one she had opened before they got married. Everything was quiet, controlled, but inside her, something had changed. She was no longer hoping Derek would come back to her. She was building a life where he couldn't reach her again. Every smile she gave him was measured. Every kiss on the cheek, every bowl of rice served, it was all part of her plan. And Derek, he didn't see any of it. He still thought he was the clever one. But Grace was no longer standing behind him. She was moving ahead, step by silent step. It started on a Tuesday morning. Derek had just stepped into the office when a man in a gray suit walked up to him and handed him a brown envelope. "Mr. Adebayo?" the man asked. Derek nodded. "You've been served." Inside were divorce papers. And attached, a thick file of fraud claims. Derek's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. Grace had laid it all out. The stolen money, the forged signature, the fake account, the mortgage taken without her knowledge. He barely had time to breathe before his phone buzzed. It was from the mortgage company. The loan on the new house had been flagged for fraud. They were freezing the property. Within hours, word had spread at work. Someone from HR called him in for a serious discussion. By noon, Derek had become the man people whispered about in the hallway. The man who had taken his wife's savings to house a side chick. Meanwhile, Alana was still in the condo when the email came. Due to a fraud report, this property has been placed under review. Occupants are advised to prepare for possible action. She read it twice, confused. Then she called Derek, but he didn't pick up. When she finally got through to him, she was shouting, "You told me this was yours. You said it was clean. I'm handling it." Derek yelled back, his voice cracking. "No, you're not." Alana screamed. "You lied. You used your wife's money." She hung up. And just like that, she was gone. That night, Derek came home, his face tight with rage. He slammed the door, his voice echoing through the house. "Grace, what the hell did you do?" She was in the living room, calmly folding laundry. Jade was already asleep. "I served you," she said softly, "and I reported the fraud. You know, the part where you forged my signature and stole my money. You're destroying my life. You've made me look like a criminal." "You are a criminal," she said, still folding. "You just didn't think I'd ever fight back." "I did everything for this family," he shouted. Grace stood up and looked him dead in the eye. "No, you did everything for yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He took a step closer. "You think you'll win this?" "I already have," she said. He stood there breathing hard, hands clenched. But something in her calm made him step back. He turned and stormed out. Grace waited until the door slammed. Then she exhaled, long and slow. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. The truth was out. And this time, it was him who had everything to lose. Grace sat in the courtroom, her hands calm in her lap. She didn't flinch when Derek walked in. He looked tired, thinner, his pride broken. The judge listened carefully to both sides. Grace's lawyer, Tamika, spoke clearly and with confidence, presenting every piece of evidence they had collected. When the judgment came, Grace felt the weight in her chest lift. The judge granted her full custody of Jade and a restraining order against Derek. The court also ruled that part of the stolen money must be returned, and Derek would face legal action for the fraud. Grace didn't smile. She just nodded and whispered, "Thank you." A few weeks later, she sold some old stocks she had kept for years, small investments from when she was younger before Derek. With that money and her new savings, she bought a modest house. It wasn't big or fancy, but it was quiet, clean, and it had a small garden where Jade could plant flowers. It was theirs. No one else's name was on the papers, just Grace Adebayo. The neighborhood welcomed her warmly. The local women, some of them single mothers, spoke kindly of her. "You handled everything with such grace," one woman said. "You didn't shout. You just acted." Grace didn't think of herself as strong. She had simply done what needed to be done. She joined a women's support group nearby, not because she needed it anymore, but because she wanted to help others. Some women were just starting to notice the cracks in their marriages. Others were already broken. Grace listened to them, shared her story, and offered quiet advice. One day, she stood in front of the group and said, "Silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means we're thinking, planning, preparing to walk away for good." At night, when Jade was asleep, Grace started journaling again. It was something she hadn't done since university. Her thoughts poured onto the pages, her fears, her regrets, her quiet hopes. She wrote about how betrayal doesn't always come loud, and healing doesn't always look like joy. Some days were hard, but most days she felt a little lighter. Jade, once quiet and always watching, began to change too. She laughed more now, real, happy laughs that filled the house. She invited friends over for homework and played music while doing chores. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden planting tiny yellow flowers, Jade looked up and said, "I like it here. It feels like peace." Grace smiled and wiped some dirt off Jade's nose. "Yes," she said, "that's exactly what it is." The morning was quiet. The sun was just rising, casting a soft orange light over the street. Grace held Jade's hand as they walked toward the school gate. Birds chirped in the trees, and the breeze was gentle against their faces. Jade wore her uniform neatly, her small backpack bouncing as she walked. She looked up at her mother with curious eyes. "Mom," she asked softly, Are you happy now? Grace paused for a moment. She looked up at the sky, then down at her daughter's face. She smiled, not a big smile, but a real one. Not yet, she said quietly, but I'm free. And that's the first step. Jade nodded like she understood. Maybe she didn't fully, but she felt something in her mother's voice. A kind of peace. Grace leaned down and kissed her forehead. Have a good day, baby. You too, Mommy. Jade ran toward her friends by the school gate, laughing and waving. Grace stood there for a second, watching her. Her daughter looked lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Then Grace turned and began walking back home. She passed the small houses on the street, trees swaying gently above them. She reached her gate, opened it, and stepped into the yard. There it was, her home. Not too big, not flashy, but it was hers. Her name was the only name on the deed. She walked up the steps slowly, breathing in the morning air. And as she opened the door, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Hey besties, thanks so much for watching till the end. Grace's quiet revenge showed that true strength doesn't need to shout. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more drama-filled emotional stories. Your support helps us keep going and sharing more powerful tales. See you in the next one. Bye for now. And always remember, silence can be the loudest answer.